As Secretary of State, Pompeo has become one of the toughest people in the current U.S. administrative system against China, and he has provided considerable personal impetus for the overall tension between China and the United States. This is related to the fact that his status as Secretary of State is obviously out of tune. The State Department is the largest executive agency of U.S. diplomacy and the protagonist of U.S. foreign policy design, and its mission should be to engage in relations, not to break up relations, but Pompeo's role in foreign relations, especially with China, has completely reversed. It should be pointed out that relations with China are also the most important bilateral relations for the United States, and the nature of Sino-US relations will to a large extent determine the background of U.S. diplomacy and even international relations as a whole. Pompeo is trying to bring Sino-US relations into an ice hole, which means he is calling for a global diplomatic winter. It has been repeatedly pointed out that Pompeo had been director of China for more than a year before presiding over the State Department, thinking that he was sailing a U.S. diplomatic ship with the thinking of the Central Intelligence Agency. In particular, Pompeo said at a rally in April, "I was director of the CIA, we lied, we cheated, we stole, and we had a course to teach. This is the glory of America's constant exploration and progress." Quote, "It must be said that it is the sorrow of the times for the world to deal with such a U.S. Secretary of State." Pompeo is also a member of the Tea Party in the United States, which is another important perspective for public opinion to observe and comment on him. The Tea Party is a far-right force in the United States, racist and hostile to the outside world. Pompeo came to the position of Secretary of State with that kind of political sustenance and ambition. His mind was not focused on building the professionalism of the chief U.S. diplomat at all. Instead, he vented his political anger and paved the way for realizing his greater political ambitions. Diplomacy is governed by international conventions that require states to abide by basic norms to maintain predictability in the international arena and to sustain fragile bilateral and multilateral political assets. In the diplomatic world, the most afraid of unreasonable roles, that kind of situation is often equivalent to a group of scholars meet soldiers. It is unreasonable to say. Pompeo is clearly such a rule breaker. He is very horizontal, a kind of underworld style, so that people who deal with him feel that they are facing the director of China, who dares to use all kinds of ruthless tactics. Pompeo, who is abandoning America's traditional great power diplomacy, despises the cautious and gentle way diplomats socialize. He goes to cocktail parties with a gun pinned to his waist, consciously or unconsciously, to uncover his clothes and reveal the gun. Diplomacy is the largest area of flexibility, and diplomats are often the most dovish groups in countries. But Pompeo is a hawk among American hawks, ruining the space for diplomatic flexibility and turning diplomacy into a face-torn rigid collision. He is now more like those who engage in political propaganda in the United States, such as those who take the lead in foreign attacks, but not like those who engage in diplomacy. So far this year, North Korea, one of Trump's key diplomatic directions, has taken the lead in effectively declaring Pompeo unwelcome, saying publicly that if Pompeo remains involved in the negotiations, there will be chaos at the negotiating table again. So it is hoped that he will be replaced by a more cautious and mature person. It is believed that more countries do not like the chief U.S. diplomat and find it too tiring to deal with him and unable to communicate with him on a professional basis. Pompeo is objectively becoming an obstacle for Washington to break through in some important diplomatic fields. It is hoped that Pompeo will reflect on what he has done. He needs to figure out what the role of diplomats should be and what responsibility he has for international peace and stability as the chief U.S. diplomat. He cannot destroy some important diplomatic rules and ties for the sake of pleasure, or out of personal self-interest and ambition. He should know that if he tramples on the bottom line of diplomatic morality, history will not forgive him in the end.